Auren Hoffman is one of those guys in Silicon Valley. Let's talk about networks for a second. Networks of people and their importance in Silicon Valley. This will make sense in a second. The networks are very important in Silicon Valley. Having big groups of people who you can work with, reach out to, etc. They're important everywhere around the world, of course. If you're in New York working for an investment bank, say, it's important, but it's a little bit different. Like you can work in investment banking and do pretty well without anybody else, really. You can have a hedge fund that just, has some algorithm and you're off in your, room with your bank of computers and you can make billions of dollars without anybody else, really. And in fact, there's something of a zero-sum game to it. That is, if I short the yen and you're long the yen, one of us wins, one of us loses. We've heard on this podcast around the world, people have different points of view on this. We heard from Marcus Dantas that in Mexico, actually, you don't want to share an idea with anybody if you have it. If one of your friends becomes successful, you'd kind of rather they didn't because you're more jealous than happy for them. So why in Silicon Valley is a network so important? You want to know and have relationships with as many people as possible. When somebody succeeds, you're really happy for them. There's actually a reason for this. And we're all good people. Sure, that's part of it. That's actually not true, but actually there's a reason for it that's a little more, if you start thinking about it, makes more and more sense. And that is that Silicon Valley isn't really a zero-sum game because of the amount of companies and wealth that are being created. And so in Silicon Valley, if you know somebody and they become successful, all kinds of things can happen for you because of that person's success. If your friend founds Uber, well, maybe they invited you to participate in the seed round and maybe you made $20 million. Maybe they hired you to be their CFO and maybe you made $100 million. Maybe they invest in your new venture fund or in your new venture. And now multiply that by relationship after relationship after relationship across sort of function. You realize that having a big network, helping people, and having other people be successful is actually a very useful thing for you, in addition to being a good thing. So who has the biggest networks in Silicon Valley? Well, probably at the top of that heap is somebody like Reid Hoffman. Hey, he invented LinkedIn. Why wouldn't he be the top guy for that? But right near the tippy top of that, of people who are incredibly well connected, is today's guest, Auren Hoffman. Auren is one of those guys that seems to know everybody and pays his wisdom forward. He learns things. Oh, he's been the CEO and founder of a public company. He's now the founder and CEO of SafeGraph, which is a hugely successful venture-backed company. And he shares his wisdom. He shares his wisdom often in napkins. You can look it up on Twitter, Auren Hoffman. You'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, Auren Hoffman, one of the most connected guys in Silicon Valley, is here today to share how he does it and share his wisdom with you. This is Auren Hoffman on the Something Ventured podcast. Thanks for listening. All right, welcome back. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Auren Hoffman. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to see you, Kent.
It is so great to have you. Auren, you're probably the second most famous Hoffman in Silicon Valley. He founded LiveRamp, which after getting acquired, it's now you can find that as a public company. He is the CEO and chief historian of SafeGraph, which has raised more than $60 million, co-founded a venture capital firm on the side with Todd Sacerdoti. And you probably know him as the author of the Summation blog. Keeping yourself pretty busy. And soon, as I understand, is there going to be a podcast?
We are doing a World of DaaS podcast. Yes. So for people who are interested in data, DAAS, there'll be a World of DaaS podcast.
Oh, that's good. That doesn't sound
I'm
like
not competing with your audience.
It does not sound like that competes with my weird brand of podcasts. It's very cool. I wanted to get a sense. I mean, you're one of the most connected people in Silicon Valley. And I kind of want to figure out how that works. But I want to start what animated you into tech? Like when you started a company, was the internet cool or were people doing it or were you kind of early to it?
Well, the first company I started was when I was in college, and that's really when the internet was just starting. So at the time, I had to pay my way through college. I had a business in high school, and I had kind of run out of money after my junior year. So I had to make enough money to pay for my last year of college. So we started this kind of internet consulting firm, really just to make some money. And then we ended up selling that about a year after we graduated.
And then, so when do you get to your first big venture back company? Like, what gets you there? Like, why didn't you why not go work at McKinsey or Goldman, and like other Cal students might might do?
I did apply to get a job at McKinsey, but they turned me down.
Okay.
And I don't think I was probably suited for that. And so yeah, a year after selling that consulting firm, we started another with the same co-founder. We started another company, and then we ended up raising some venture capital for that.
And what was your journey like? I mean, was it a quick win up to the right, or did you like grind it out for a while? Like, what was the?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the first one was, barely a single. The second one was barely a single as well. So with lots of ups and downs along the way, and going through tons of layoffs, and all the things that you would predict with a new company.
Yeah. And then eventually it becomes acquired though, and now it's a public company. Is that right?
Well, so later that was LiveRamp, but this was like three companies before
Oh,
that.
geez.
Yeah, yeah.
So why do you keep doing it? Like, what about this like makes you say, okay, I'm going to keep just starting companies, and it's brutal and it's painful, and you lay people off, and you have a couple highs along the way. Like, what animated that for you?
Well, I think there's like three important reasons to work. Like, I guess maybe two of them maybe is more selfish, one of them more altruistic. Like the first one is what are you getting out of it in the very, very short term? Like, are you learning? Are you building friendships? Like all those things. The second thing is like, what are you getting out of it in the very long term? Like building wealth or creating reputation, building skills, et cetera. Those are the two more selfish reasons. And the third one, which is might be more altruistic, is what are you contributing back to society? And I think to really be fulfilled at work, and this is for anyone, whether you're starting a company or not, you need all three. You might not need all three equally at all times, but you do need to like basically be able to credibly tell yourself a story about all three.
Yeah.
The best career advice I've gotten was from Peter Thiel. And he said like it's really important to optimize for the very short term and the very long term, and never optimize for the medium term. And almost all smart people do the opposite. They try to optimize much more for optionality. And that's kind of the reason that 80% of the people who go to law school go for that optionality reason. If you're going to go to go to law school, go because you have a deep passion for the law, not because you're just hoping to have some optionality to get some job in the future.
Yeah, I took one look at the LSAT and I was like, like, no way. It is funny the number of people who do that when you're in college, and you kind of look at the world, and you kind of think there's like three things. There's like lawyers, doctors, investment bankers. And then you don't realize that there's just these crazy like product man. I guess now you do, but at the time I graduated from college, like you wouldn't ever think of just being a product manager at a video company or something like that. You had these like very bracketed things.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to medical school because you truly want to heal people and be a doctor, that's great. If you're going to law school because you truly love the law and you want to do something around the law, that's wonderful. My wife truly loves the law. But if you're going to law school because you just don't know what you want to do and you're looking for some optionality, then that 3 years of time might be better spent doing something else.
Yeah. You talk about giving back, and you really have in your career somehow decided to dedicate yourself to that. I think there's two things. One, you just seem like a very well-connected person in Silicon Valley. Like you know a lot of people. How did that? And I've actually kind of realized this. My partner is Jonathan Abrams, and I've determined that his network is like exactly like 2 to 3 times bigger than mine. Because every time we like know someone on LinkedIn, if he
did
like,
start Friendster, so.
I know, but if he has like 30 connections, I have like 10. It's almost mathematical, and I would guess that number for you is even bigger. How did that happen for you? That started to be something that you did?
Well, I personally think like connecting with people and networking is incredibly overrated. And the what you knows are really becoming increasingly much more powerful than the who you knows. historically a who you know would kind of put two what you knows together and then take a vig on the transaction. Today, it's way, way, way easier to go direct. And so the who you knows are still important, but their power probably peaked in like 2002 before social networks.
Right. And so you decide to give back in another way too. You're thinking so there's some people and people all over the world listen to this podcast, so you can't assume that everyone knows who everyone is. But someone like Fred Wilson, who just had a kind of a finally got lucky with Coinbase going public, has a blog and he shares knowledge about the venture capital industry. And you have a blog, Summation, where you share some pretty deep thoughts about how to kind of navigate your way through a career. And a lot of tech blogs are very kind of obvious, like, here's how you do this and here's how you do that. You seem to share a lot of interesting but non-obvious advice with people.
Yep.
Like, for example, you talk about avoiding good opportunities. Like, what the heck does that mean? That seems like bad advice.
Well, the more successful you get, the more important it is to spend time to avoid good opportunities. Because otherwise you're going to end up in this like local maximum, because you're just going to keep pursuing these good opportunities instead of like actually holding out for the great opportunities. Now, when you're, early on in your career, you don't even see that many good opportunities. So you're kind of like training your brain to like jump on the good opportunity and take advantage of it and avoid the bad ones. But the more you progress on your career, you're going to see good opportunities come at you every single day. And if you just do that, you're gonna be flat in your career. And so you really have to avoiding, of course, you want to avoid the terrible things that are out there and the huge pitfalls. But sometimes the great ones also could be the pitfalls. And so you have to take a little bit of risk sometimes to go after these greater opportunities.
Right. Is there any advice that you hear given to entrepreneurs? Because there's a lot of who listens to these podcasts, people trying to figure out what to do, and they get every point of the compass in terms of advice. Do this, no, don't do that. Is there any piece of advice that you hear people giving that you think is just terrible to like kind of a young entrepreneur trying to build her career?
I think there's a bunch of things I think that are bad advice. So maybe two things come to mind. The first thing is a lot of smart people say to delegate things that you're bad at. I think this is very bad advice. The problem when you delegate those things that you're bad at is you're likely going to delegate them to someone who isn't great, because you just don't have enough judgment to know if someone is good, if you yourself is bad at them. Instead, you should really spend most of your time delegating things you're really good at, and you're going to do a great job of delegating those things. And then another thing I think smart people often give advice is we talked about this earlier, they really overemphasize optionality. And to me, optionality is just a path to a very middling and average life. And you should do everything possible to avoid optionality. If you think of like getting married, that's almost the best example where you're really foregoing optionality. And for many people, it's the most fulfilling thing that you can do in life. So thinking of it through that lens is really important, to do everything possible to forego optionality. And that's especially true in a company. You can't just like, oh, I'm going to do this, have a little bit of option here, a little bit. You really have to kind of go for it and focus and actually be deterministic about what you want to do.
Yeah. Now, at what point did you figure this out? You've been these lessons are things that do you study kind of what people, write and like, oh, that's a good idea? Or is it, no, I learned this the hard way through three or four companies?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think most people who give advice don't always take all their advice, and I'm also guilty of that. So just because it's like a doctor who tells you not to smoke and they're smoking themselves. Right. Just because they don't do it doesn't mean that isn't the right advice. So I'm just as guilty of it as possible, but most of it has been learned the hard way.
Yeah. And so what would you advise, a young entrepreneur comes to, comes to Silicon Valley or one of the new hotspots, and they say, I want to be really well connected, like someone like Auren. What do you advise? I mean, there's the guys who run around, they're kind of peripatetic about, parties and meeting people. Like, what is your advice to approaching that? Say, I want to build a fulfilling, either personally or for my career, and around tech, around Silicon Valley, which I think is kind of the future.
Well, I think the simple thing is just always try to help people in every interaction. And it's one of the reasons that it's like, I don't really love to do the like podcasts, because I'm not really helping you, Kent, right
Right.
now. Now, hopefully this can be helpful to your listeners. But before you meet with anyone, just think like, how can I help them? What can I do to give them to make their day better, or to make their life a little bit better? And it might just be a small thing that you can do, but almost everyone can help somebody else. Like the intern in the college intern could maybe has something they could do to help Bill Gates. And so always should be thinking about, how can I help this person that I'm meeting with?
Right. Rather than what can I take from them?
Yeah.
What, so you come to found, like, what is your company seem to have a certain thesis to them. You have a podcast on a certain topic. What is animating this? Like, what animates, you don't need to do SafeGraph. You could probably just piece out, and well, you are a venture capitalist too, but like, um, it's funny that you have like kind of a side career. It's a whole career for some people. What animates SafeGraph? Like, what starts? Why did you start this?
Well, we think it's really important to have SafeGraph's a data company. We just sell data. We don't do anything else. We essentially just sell a collection of facts. And we think there's a few different ways the world could go in the future. One of the ways the world can go is that most of the data is controlled by like 12 companies. And in that world, you see basically a real slowdown on innovation, because data really does power innovation, and you would just see a lot less innovation. And then, of course, you would see most of the rents to that innovation accrue to those 12 companies. And that's really not a world that I want to live in, or really anyone I know wants to live in. And the way to combat that is to have an independent data company that is really utility. Just like today, anyone can get access to compute. You want a data company where anyone can get access to the data, and really democratize that access to data.
And as you've built this company, has it been pretty much the same thing the whole way, or did you learn something along the way and say, oh, that's really the opportunity?
Yeah, I think we've changed our mind a few times. So I mean, we've always just set out to be a data company. Originally, we had a different idea about what data we wanted, but we had to buy data about physical places, and that's what SafeGraph really focuses on today. There are a couple thousand companies that sell data about physical places, but I think they're originally kind of focused on a different market. When we were trying to buy that data, we couldn't find any data that was more than 50% accurate. And we sell to data scientists, and data scientists really need like in the 90% accurate, because you're building these models on the data. And so these errors compound really, really, really fast. I think in the past, a lot of data companies were either selling into like marketing and advertising, where 50% accurate is more than good enough. If you're selling into marketing and advertising, that's actually really good. Or they were selling to like an individual broker or something, and an individual can like disambiguate it themselves. But if you're selling to like a data science or machine learning team, where like who our primary customers are, they really need a very high level of accuracy. Otherwise, those errors will compound really fast.
And so as you think about, as you start a podcast on this topic, what will you cover on that? And what are you thinking of, like, who would the audience be?
Well, I'm really fascinated with data and data businesses. They're very weird, and they're very different. There's certainly some things that maybe some similarity to an enterprise business or a SaaS business or something like that. But in the end, you're just selling facts. That's it. And then somebody's taking those facts and maybe incorporating with many, many other types of facts, and then they're building some sort of great innovation on top of it. And we like to say at SafeGraph, we sell high quality butter to pastry chefs, and then they take our butter, many, many other ingredients, and their own ingenuity and their own tools, and they create this like amazing croissant. But just because you have high quality butter doesn't mean you're going to end up with an amazing croissant, right? I'm sure we've tasted like croissants that just melt in our mouth and croissants that taste like styrofoam. And so it really still is about the ingenuity of the creator, of the innovator. And that's who we serve. There's some humility when you're a data company. You're not the end solution. You're just an ingredient to that innovator who then creates the end solution.
Right. And is there a satisfaction then that comes from watching things happen, like problems get solved with your with your data, or is there a
Yeah,
frustration?
exactly. Another analogy is like you're the archivist. So there's these people who they wrote the Constitution and they're venerated in our society for writing the U.S. Constitution. But there's also the people who like preserve the Constitution and help interpret the Constitution, help, and so, and maybe nobody knows the name of the best archivists out there, but they're incredibly important in like maintaining kind of our culture and maintaining how we are.
And why are you also called the chief historian of your company?
Well, as I mean, SafeGraph is a data company. Data is about truth and essentially a historical record of what happened in the past. So people that create data are historians, and all great data companies predict the past so that their customers can essentially better predict the future.
Interesting. So what happened? In history, there have been very few CEOs who have led a company through a pandemic. What happened at your company when COVID sort of first, you're like, oh, I'm running this company. I might need to raise capital the next year. And this sort of crazy external thing has happened. How'd that go for you guys?
Well, we got lucky. COVID really significantly accelerated SafeGraph's business. We sell data about physical places, and so pre-COVID, the death rate of a place was roughly about 1% a month, which is actually really, really high. But very few people realized it was so high. Since COVID, the death rate of a place is closer to 3% a month, which is like insanely high. And it's also in the zeitgeist, like everyone sees it happening because we see like the creative destruction right before our eyes of the local coffee shop shutting down. And accurate data is always really important, but it becomes increasingly important when the rate of change is much, much higher.
And did you see something in your data as COVID hit that wasn't an obvious fact?
Well, it's happening every day. So we see all of these things. I mean, even just things like, so, one mundane thing we track is store hours, like the local store hours of the McDonald's or something like that. And, that does change at a much faster rate than people think. You would think like the local McDonald's at 555 Main Street never changes the store hours, and they actually do quite a bit. It changes quite often. But during the pandemic, in some cases, it was changing daily. One day it was open, one day it wasn't open at all, one day it was like open 24 hours. The next day it's like open for 2 hours. And, and so you're just seeing this like rate of changes that were happening that really never before in history have happened at that rate.
Right. And what do you think is going to change now? Like, as either you think this personally or based on the data from SafeGraph, like as we come out of what'll be the same, what'll be different? Because it seems like it's coming fast. Like people are wanting to come meet with us, and they're getting vaccinated, and hey, we're having a birthday party on XYZ date. Like what's your sense of the world after this hopefully passes?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, certainly there's some things. I'll probably certainly travel a lot less. I'll travel a lot less in 2022 than I did in 2019. And I'm sure that's probably true for most people for business travel, that they'll travel a lot less. Now, maybe for personal travel, they'll travel more because maybe they'll be working remotely and it'll be easier for them to do things. And it'll be more simple for them to live in Florida for a month and then go live in California for a month and then go live in France for a month or something. So you could see different things happening but business travel seems like it will go down. I wouldn't be surprised if it went down more than 50% from 2019 levels.
Yeah, I think the days of flying to Scottsdale for a 2-hour meeting, it's just, I mean, the amount of times we did that kind of stuff, flew to New York or flew to, wherever for a conference is just kind of ridiculous. It's funny. I went to a restaurant recently too, and I was like, it was funny. Like, it's kind of good. And it's kind of like, you're back to okay, where's the waiter? Empty, the glass has been empty for a couple minutes here. I'm not used to that at home. I'm used to
there's a lot of nice things about being at home.
I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated by these sort of roaring 20s or, kind of brave new world here. So where are your people? Are they not in San Francisco? Are they your team?
Our team's all over the place. So, we're a remote first company, but pre-COVID, we probably had about 50% of our team in the Bay Area just because our network was there. Today, 16% of our company is in the Bay Area, and probably by the end of the year, it'll be closer to 10%. in the Bay Area. And so you're really starting to see people move out, and and then of course we're opening up, we're hiring, and we hire in anywhere in North America. So we're hiring in all these different spots in the US, Canada.
And how does that work from a management perspective? Like, do you get paid the same to be in Tennessee as you do in New York? And like, how do you manage culture and all that?
There are a lot of companies that do pay differently. So they pay people in San Francisco, let's say 1.3x what they pay people in Chicago or something. We feel strongly that we should pay people the same for the same job. So if two software engineers are just as good and they're doing the same output, like we want to pay wherever they live. And if they move, we shouldn't like have to lower their salary or raise their salary or something like that. You should get paid the same thing for being just good. So you get to choose where you want to live. And if you want to live in rural Indiana and you could buy a really nice home for $200,000, like good for you. You should go do that. As long as you have a good internet connection, we're not going to penalize you.
Right. And so what do you make of the death of Silicon Valley? Everyone's moving to Miami and Austin.
Well, I mean, Silicon Valley certainly isn't over, but it is in serious trouble. I mean, it's extremely difficult to raise a family in Silicon Valley. San Francisco has the lowest percentage of people under 18 of any major county in America, and that was pre-COVID. Post-COVID, that's probably been even accelerated. And there are counties in America that are dominated with retirement communities, like in Florida, that have a higher percentage of kids than San Francisco. And in the past, a lot of people were making this trade-off to take kind of the short-term hit on maybe their emotional and financial well-being for kind of the medium-term possibilities that Silicon Valley companies provide. In kind of this new world that embraces remote work, the trade-off is going to be increasingly harder to make. And I think we're going to see more people opt to be in other places.
Do you think there's an answer for what San Francisco should do? There's this really weird thing. They built the Salesforce Tower, which is this massive tower that theoretically holds a ton of people. And then a couple of years later, they told everyone their employees can just work from wherever.
Yeah.
Is there something is there a solution, something San Francisco should do to, get off of the, bad/expensive branding?
Well, I think it's difficult. San Francisco still has a lot of, it will still be a great place. And it's not like, I don't think there'll be one place that everyone goes to instead. And so I think that place that people are going to go to is the cloud. I think people will move to other, and I think this is good for America and good for the world, for people to go to that community in Indiana where your parents live and be close to family and, have a different kind of life, and don't have to always follow like the Silicon Valley rat race.
Yeah. It is fascinating. It's like kind of what COVID reveals a little bit about people. I was talking to a woman who's a, very super high powered. She works for a big Dubai-based family office, and she was in Ohio. And I was talking to her on the Zoom call. I was like, why are you in Ohio? She's like, well, that's where I grew up. I was like, yeah, of course. She grew up somewhere and went to college and became successful. And of course, she didn't just start out in Dubai or San Francisco necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in San Francisco, if you live in San Francisco, it is very hard to feel rich with less, if you have a family without less than $10 million net worth. And that's insane.
Yeah.
Most places you can, if you're making $150,000 a year, you feel rich. Maybe you don't feel rich. Maybe at $300,000, you feel rich. And that's good. You shouldn't have to have a gazillion dollars in the bank before you feel like you can take care of your family.
Yeah. What do you make of that in Silicon Valley over time? Like, I feel like I just had David Bonnet on, who founded GeoCities and got really wealthy from it. But when he started it, he wasn't starting it because you could be worth $2 billion. And it feels like now people are, I don't know, like, do you think there's still that passion for somebody to come to Silicon Valley and build something because it's cool? Or is it, no, I need to build the next Coinbase and be worth like $800 million, which is the only thing that pays more than being in a hedge fund?
Well, I don't know. I think people who are truly successful at starting companies generally are doing that because they have a passion for what they're doing. And I think the Coinbase founders had a true passion for what they're doing, and but certainly wealth building is a helpful carrot. And because even if you're trying to pursue your passion, you're going to have highs and lows, and having this like extra carrot probably does allow you to work harder and really kind of focus more and maybe not give up on your passion, et cetera. So I think this is generally a good thing that people can create wealth. I think Coinbase has built like an incredible company, and it's done a lot of good for the world.
What would you like to see in the tech industry? As you've kind of, its greatnesses and its flaws. What would you like to see happen going? I've had a lot of women, people of color on who are like, oh, we need to work on that in Silicon Valley. The income disparity, the financial incentives. What is there something? Is there a hope that you have for Silicon Valley and writ large, people all over the world working to build tech companies?
Well, I do think one of the we have a bit of an echo chamber that happens online, and it can be somewhat pernicious, and it can cause ideas to get a little bit more calcified, and and also could really narrow the window of ideas that you can play with. And so I do think it's really important, if you're someone who likes to connect ideas, who likes to think about ideas, to really find a diverse group of people where you can play with ideas in kind of a safe space. And playing with ideas generally is not safe, right? You can't do that on the record or in public, because you're still playing with it. They're not formed. They might come out the wrong way. So you really need to do this with some sort of trusted group of people who always assume good intent from you. And the problem is, most people who, if they're doing that, they're playing with ideas with really a very small, tight-knit group of friends. And all those friends think in very, very, very similar ways. So you somehow need to find like a much broader group than your 5 closest friends. But they still need to assume good intent, so you can play with these ideas. And I think these things are even more important in the age of social media. I've personally been really lucky to be part of a group of leaders that help each other kind of develop these ideas over time.
And how does that group? How do you function, and how do you develop those ideas?
Well, I think the first is just having a norm. Well, one norm is this is in public. So we're allowing people to play with ideas. The second norm is you're assuming good intent. You're assuming everyone is a good person, and you're kind of in a yes and mentality rather than a no but mentality when you're working with them, and you're helping them get to helping them form that idea and get to those really great ideas. There are some people who maybe just kind of like go off to a shack somewhere, and like the Unabomber or something, and they write these like amazing manifestos or something. But most people aren't like that. Most people need other people to help them sharpen their ideas, to think through their ideas, to eliminate some of the less good parts of their idea or theories, et cetera. So it's really important to have other people around you, and especially people that think very, very different from you, to help you like think through some of these ideas.
Yeah, I talked to Charles Hudson. He had a kind of interesting perspective where he was talking about Black people becoming VCs and how few there are. And he's like, if you're a venture capitalist, you probably know a lot of women. You might be married to a woman. He's like, you may not literally have a Black friend, like not for any good or bad reason, but that just might be the case. And I thought, wow, there are people like that in Silicon Valley, where it's such a narrow it's such an echo chamber. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, it's an extremely yeah, and it's not just Silicon Valley. I think most people, if you just look at your close group of friends, they're going to be very, very similar to one another. And I'm not just talking about like race and things like that, which is probably true, but just like they probably all vote the same way. They're probably all like very similar types of things. They just that's just the way it is, and that's okay with maybe your closest friends. But if you're really trying to play with ideas, you need a broad, diverse group of folks who think in a very, very different type of way to help you play with those ideas.
And as SafeGraph, kind of wrap up and ask you about the future of a couple of things here. But with you supplying data to people, do you get into the mix or into issues of good uses and bad uses, evil uses of data?
Well, I think certainly data can be used for good or for bad. And we believe strongly that we're just putting out the facts. So we're not that different from Wikipedia or something. And yes, a bad person could read Wikipedia and do something bad with it. And also a good person could go do it. And I think long term, like Wikipedia does way, way, way more good. Yes, it enables bad things to happen. Like an encyclopedia will enable bad things. Someone will read it and figure out how to build a bomb, so these bad things will happen from reading encyclopedias. That is the downside of knowledge and spreading knowledge. But the good almost certainly massively outweighs the bad. And so we believe strongly that our data should be open. It's data, it's just facts. That's all it is. So it should be open, and it should be open for we're not going to like pick and choose who gets to read a fact about a particular thing.
So what's next? You've just raised a tremendous amount of capital. What's next for SafeGraph? Like, what's animating you and getting you out of bed and making you excited about this now that you really seem to have the resources to do something to really scale this thing?
Well, we're still in just like the very, very, very early stage of our vision. Our vision is to really democratize access to data. We're focused initially on democratizing access to data about physical places. And if you think of data, there's really 4 core categories of data that you'd want to have data on. One is data around people. The second is data around places. That's what SafeGraph's focused on. The third is data around organizations or companies. And the fourth is data around products. And of course, you could have like some sort of subset of that. And you can all cross them all with time. You can cross them with price. You can even cross them with each other, right? But those are kind of like the 4 main building blocks of data. So we're kind of firmly right now in the data about physical places world.
Well, congratulations. You're not done yet, but you're farther than a lot of companies. It's incredible.
Oh, thank you.
So how do people, I think a lot of young entrepreneurs look to you, your blog, as an inspiration. How would you advise people to follow your thinking? You've got a podcast coming, there's a company, there's a Twitter, there's a summation. Like, how do people, benefit from what you've learned?
Yeah, obviously you can follow me on Twitter, AUREN, Auren at Twitter, or go to my blog, summation.net, or Auren at Substack. That'd be great. I love interacting with people. So if someone wants to like ask a question to me, what I do like, I get a lot of DMs of people or emails, people asking me, hey, can you give me advice on that? I don't like those as much because it's not public. It's like I'm helping one person out. So if you're gonna just at me on Twitter and just ask for the world, or and then I'll write a reply there, and then everyone can go see it.
Is there any high frequency question you've been getting from people and entrepreneurs lately?
I think you get the gambit. I mean, everyone has an individual thing, and hopefully by the time you're asking a question, it's something that you can't find as much on Google. Yeah. So that means the question is going to be a lot more unique.
Yeah. All right. There's a bunch of ways to find. And then what's the timing and the people who want to listen to another podcast and yours in particular? What's the timing and name of that podcast?
The name is World of DaaS, DAAS, for Data as a Service, and it will be coming out. Maybe by the time this podcast goes live, so sometime in May of 2021.
I call this podcast Something Ventured, but I had an idea for a podcast name, Hello World. Isn't that a great name for a podcast?
I love it. Yes.
Oh, man, I wish I'd thought of that one earlier. But so if you need a name, Hello World, I think is that.
Okay, we could still change it. So who knows?
All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken. That was a lot of fun.
All right. Auren Hoffman's my guest. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I'll talk to you next time.